What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's happening to the overall market thus far, what you should be watching for as time progresses, and what's going on with the earnings coming out for tomorrow and today. But before I begin to all this information, before I talk about all the data and the charts, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit $500 into the account, you are guaranteed 20 free stocks. If you deposit $25,000 or more, you're guaranteed 75 free stocks. And this offer ends in just a couple of days. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to the market. So looking at SPY, we had this very clean looking head and shoulders like structure. We talked about this yesterday. We also mentioned this in the morning. Then I also mentioned the same thing on Microsoft, which played out very nicely. The QQQ had a very similar setup, which played out. And we started to see this play out so nicely throughout the charts. But one thing that I didn't really predict properly was Tesla, because we had some bullish news that came out. So instead of following the market, Tesla ended up outperforming alongside many other EVs. I'll be briefly talking about that as well. But I first want to talk about some data, talk about some earnings coming out before I break down these charts. So what's happening for tomorrow? Tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, February 27th. I just want to mention to everyone that at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 30 minutes before the market opens, we have the home price report coming out, the home price index, not to mention the changes coming out for those prices. This is going to affect the market to some extent, maybe not to large, not to a large extent, but to some small extent, it's worth watching. Then on top of this, we have Barr from the Fed giving a speech at 9:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And at 10 o'clock a.m., we have the Consumer Confidence Report coming out, not to mention the Fed Manufacturing Index, the Fed Services Index, and all this important data. So the data that's going to be the most important for tomorrow is going to be between 10 o'clock a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And after that, everything else is going to just cool off. So why is this so important? What's so big about this data? This is going to be important for understanding manufacturing shipments, not to mention services, which make up a very big sector in this economy. It's also going to help us understand if these sectors are seeing big declines, which tend to be associated with recessions. So you want to be very careful. We're not solely just looking out for a recession, but it has more to do with what we're seeing in the trends and how the Fed is looking at these different prices and changes. So watch for that. The big data comes out at 10 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Might move the market quite a bit, so watch for volatility at that time. I would say after like around 11 o'clock a.m., the market may cool off and not have as much volatility. So watch for high volatility at this time, and we'll see how it goes. Now for earnings, after the market closed today, we just had Unity, Zoom, and just a couple of others announce their earnings. And for tomorrow, we have Norwegian Cruise Line, we have AutoZone, Lowe's, and just a couple of others. So when it comes to Zoom, this thing just continues to climb very nicely. It's had some very, very nice looking earnings, and they did very, very well. They beat on EPS right over here at $1.22. Revenue was a beat at $1.15 billion. And on top of this, they also had good guidance, not bad whatsoever. This is very, very awesome for what many of these investors were looking for. So good earnings, good guidance. And they also said for the 2025 fiscal year, they're going to be looking at $4.85 to $4.88, and EPS, which is once again very, very good. That is actually aligned with expectations, if not a little bit better than what the consensus was. So strong earnings, strong guidance, and Zoom is once again just continuing to squeeze, continuing to rocket. Now what's coming next is going to be Unity. This, however, had very mixed earnings. They beat on revenue at about $609 million, but they missed on EPS by about 88 cents. So they missed on EPS, they beat on revenue, so not the best for them. But the reason why the share price crashed, I think it was down like 17% the last time I checked it, is because of their forecast, their guidance. The company forecast of 415 million to 420 million for the fiscal first quarter revenue is basically not what they were looking for. We were looking for 534 million, so that's well below average, which is not good, unfortunately, for them. So that being said, they had mixed earnings and bad guidance. That's why Unity software is just crashing right now. So it is what it is. There's not a whole lot that can be done about that. So with that being said, I just want to also talk about Alphabet. Shares have fallen over 4% after they announced a pause in their AI image generator. Not the best of things you want to hear, but with news like this comes out, it is what it is. That's why Alphabet ended up dropping. Now, why were Tesla and many EVs outperforming, doing better than I expected, at least from yesterday? I did make an adjustment to my analysis on these stocks in the morning, of course, just to kind of adjust for it. But the reason why they did even better than expected and they outperformed the market is because lots of bullish news came out for the EV sectors. We had BYD proposing doubling up their share buyback, unveiling the U9 supercar, which is supposed to rival Ferrari. And on top of this, this is great news because it's showing a lot of strength for the company and growth in their EV sector. Then we also had Li Auto, which is a big company in China. They announced their earnings. They actually ended up rising very nicely, beating on expectations, and this helped stocks like NIO and XPeng. So the whole EV sector ended up pushing together based off the optimism that was coming out, and that's why Tesla did a very good job at outperforming SPY and these other tickers. So what's happening with SPY? What do I think is going to pan out? Here's my simple answer, guys. I think we have more downside coming. The 4 hour is showing me that 505 should be expected, but we'll have to see how it reacts to that. I mean, if we lose that, our next target is 503.5. We have this clean head and shoulders. It's very basic, very simple. Clean break below 507, and we're coming down to our next support right over here at 505 to 505.5. If anything, it looks bearish. It's going to drop a little bit more. We'll see if we rebound a little bit off this and then continue to sink to 503. That is the most likely possibility. If you want to turn around, you want to see this thing try to get back above 507.5 and eventually try to get back above 508.5, but like I said, not looking that likely for a nice bounce. It looks like downside looks more likely, and there might be a little bit more selling coming. So look for a little rebound and then a drop to about 505. We could even come all the way down to 503 depending on how we react, and then we'll see what it does from there. But if anything, it looks a bit more bearish. I'm going to talk about like the QQQ and a few others before I talk about Tesla, by the way, because there's something else I wanted to say. For the QQQ, we have a somewhat similar setup. It's not as symmetrical, but this kind of looks like a head and shoulders. You could even argue it kind of looks like a diamond top. I mean, it depends on interpretation, but either way, it's the same difference, guys. It looks like a topping process on the QQQ was forming here with this wick right here. This does not mean I'm saying that SPY and the QQQ are going to crash. I don't think they're going to crash straight down to like low levels like 400 on an instant. I don't see it happening like that. I'm seeing a very, very healthy pullback for now, and we'll see what happens once we get to certain levels. But that's the way I want to go about this, taking baby steps, not being too bearish, because you know what could happen if you're too bearish? The market could eat you alive. So you want to be very careful. So with the QQQ, I'm seeing something very similar on the 4 hour time from a SPY. I'm seeing a test of 435 to 434 coming. If that fails us, 432 is next. We are looking a little bit more bearish, so I expect a little bit more downside on the QQQ as the most likely possibility. Watch resistance at 436, and then if we do break that, we could technically get very close to 438, but that's where we failed to break today. If we lose 436 again tomorrow morning, watch it come down to, I would say, between 434 and 435, the chop zone historically. And once we lose 434, if we do, we have a gap to fill very close to 432, a little bit below that. So what do I think is the most likely possibility? Excuse me, most likely possibility. I would say that we have a left shoulder here, we have a head and a right shoulder. It's very likely we get a little pop and we just start to slowly decline a bit towards this gap support at 434. So I do anticipate some downside on the QQQ. It doesn't have to be a fast drop. It could just slowly make its way lower, just like how it was consolidating today and slowly dropped. How about Nvda? What do I see for Nvda? So for Nvda, okay, let me clean this up just a little bit. So I wanted to look at it like this. We consolidated today and we got this little sell-off at the end of the day. Similar to the QQQ, we got this nice liquidity sweep right here, which dictated how the QQQ and the NASDAQ moved. And we have a head and shoulders. We have this like left shoulder-like formation here. We have this head, and this is kind of like a right shoulder. So it's more like a topping formation. And we're going to be watching resistance at this 790 to 792 area. And if we break that, we could get close to 798 to 800. For support, make sure you watch right here at 785, and we have 782 as two support zones. The entire zone 782 to 785 are two levels to watch for. If we lose 782, 776 is coming, followed by 770 flat, which is where we have this wick. So this to me is looking like a topping process. Nvidia is looking a little bit weaker, so I could see this thing decline a little bit. And I do favor a little bit more downside, so we'll see how it goes right here. So it looks to me like it might drop a little bit more. Watch and see if we see more downside. I do favor that somewhat more on Nvidia. I'm not saying it's crashing down to like 600. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying that it might pop a bit and make its way slowly down towards 776. That is the most likely possibility. It could even go lower if we lose that, so just be careful. Now, with SPY, the QQQ, and Nvidia possibly falling, this could add some baggage to Tesla, kind of dragging it down just a bit, but the technicals still look pretty good for it. And there's a good chance it might continue to outperform because we had some good news, which is dictating the price action. So Tesla's going to come down. Let's see how well it holds at 198. If we do fail to hold that, we could come down to like, I'd say closer to 195. But then we have to see where it bounces. It has to bounce either off 198 or 195 and make its way back up. We'll have to wait and see where it goes and where we open tomorrow. But I think there's a good chance a little decline is coming. Then we'll see if we could bounce again depending on the news. Tesla's a little bit more tricky for me to predict because it's so reactive to the news. It's very tricky to determine everything. But I do want to tell you that from technicals, there's a very good chance that this could be a nice accumulation that's forming a nice double bottom. So the most likely possibility is Tesla comes down a bit to one of these two levels and we get a nice bounce. We have an imbalance over here at 196.4. We also have this support at 195. So somewhere around that range, it might come down to bounce, or it could bounce from here. You could even draw out your Fibonacci chart. You could take like a Fibonacci retracement right here and just kind of like draw this out. If you guys want, we could do something like this, just like real quick, and you guys could see right here, our 0.618 retracement happens to be around like just a little bit under 195. So there are different interpretations of this. I would say just like watch it to see where this thing retraces to and look for a bounce after that. That's probably the best thing that I would say for Tesla. Look for a little retracement and see if we could try to bounce back up towards 198 and eventually break 200. I'll be watching for that nonetheless. And on top of this, we have the one and only Aapl stock. Aapl, in my opinion, is not looking the best. This thing had an attempted inverse head and shoulders like structure, which failed, and now it's dropping even lower. So you could see it failed to hold 181.36. By losing that, there is a risk of it coming down to 180, then 178. So I'm going to be watching 181, then 180. We'll see if this thing ends up failing, and we'll see how it goes from there. So there is this like risk of downside. For a few more tickers, I'm just going to go over a couple more real quick for everyone. Rivian, it looks like if it could break 11, I'm going to be looking at 11.8 to be our next target. Maybe a little bit lower than that, depending on where the 20 EMA is. But look for a little bounce on Rivian. It could try to push a little bit longer. Let me see, SoFi, I'm going to be looking for a push towards 8.7 and then 8.8. I could see this actually pushing a little higher. And I just want to call out this imbalance on the 4-hour time frame over here. That basically shows $9 is our target. So I think it might slowly uptrend towards 8.75 and higher levels like that. 8.7, then 8.8. And eventually we have 9 after that. So it looks a little bullish. ARM, nice breakouts today. It's still on a very, very nice uptrend. It actually held the 20 EMA and bounced. So if this thing keeps going, going to be looking for a test of about 150 and 154. So far, it's showing some life, looking bullish. Russell 2000 started off strong, but I'd be a little bit careful with it since we're approaching this resistance. It could push a little bit more to 202 and then reject, but the chart is still holding up nicely. It's outperforming SPY and the others. So look for a little bit more upside at 202 and see how it reacts from there. For Microsoft, did I skip Supermicro? I'm sorry about that, guys. I'm going to do this, then I'm going to talk about Microsoft. Supermicro, this is just kind of trading sideways. It's not really doing a whole lot. There is a risk of it retesting 869. If we do lose that, then expect 8.4. If it holds that, it could try to rebound. We'll see what it does as it's testing that. But there is a risk of this 20 EMA. If we lose this, some downside could come. So just be a little bit careful. I would just be very careful with this because it's being heavily dictated by the other semiconductor sectors. For Microsoft, exactly what we called out, a head and shoulders, left shoulder here, head up here, right shoulder. We have a gap to fill at 405. I think we're going to be sinking to 405 on Microsoft by tomorrow. It looks bearish to me. On AMD, looking a little bit weak. Going to be looking to see if we could hit 174 very soon. It might come down a little bit to 174 if we lose that. I'm going to be anticipating it to come all the way down here. Going to be looking at this previous level at 170. So I see 174 coming. I think it's going to test that at the 50 EMA and some more downside after that. For the VIX also came down with the market, but going to be looking to see if this thing could base very soon. We have this gap down here. It actually has not been able to fill the gap yet. We'll see how it holds around this support. I'm not seeing this as a historical support that's that strong, but if it does rebound, we have to try to get back above 14. If it does achieve that, there is hope for it to try to fill this gap for the market to sink more. So we'll see if we can try to break back above 14. The dollar is very flat right now, looking a little weak. We'll see how it holds 103.78. If we bounce off this could be bearish for the market. If we fail to do so, it wouldn't be the best of signs because I think a lot of people are watching these. These are very manipulated, and there's a lot of other things going on. So watch 103.78 and see if this bounces. If it does bounce, that could be bearish for the markets. Coinbase got a bullish break. 200 plus is likely going to be tested. Watch 200 and see if it rejects or not. We had bullish news that came out from the SEC. Watch 200. If it breaks, we could go a little higher. I would be watching around like 205. But watch that resistance. It's on a very, very nice break, and we'll see how it goes after that. So very, very nice looking cup and handle like structure right here. Got the nice breakout. Could go higher. 200 plus is a real possibility. Google came down after the AI news were announced, and it's still looking a little bit weak, barely at 139. 138 to 139 is to be watched. If we lose support at 138, a bigger drop is coming to 136.7. If we hold it, if we manage to hold 138, look for a rebound. We're going to likely test 138. If that fails us, 136 is next, and we'll see which level it ends up bouncing at. I think it's going to bounce at one of those two, so we'll see how it goes. Amazon's looking a little bit weak. I told you to watch that 175.5 area. We went a little bit higher during the pre-market, then rejected. I think 173.3 is coming, followed by 172.5. So it could drop a little bit more. So we'll see how it goes. I do anticipate Amazon might have a little pullback. And for Meta, I think that Meta looks a little bearish. I think that we might see this thing test this area right here, 476 and eventually 473. So I see some downside coming. So watch for that very carefully. Anyways, guys, that is it for this video. I just want to say I appreciate every one of you so much for listening. Please have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Make sure you watch your levels and be prepared for some downside for many different stocks out there. Watch your levels just to be safe. Do not expect a massive crash. Don't expect SPY to crash like crazy. Watch the levels slowly and be very patient. That's the best thing I could tell you. Don't listen to those people on YouTube who are making all this money saying it's going to crash, it's going to crash. If they end up being right, sure, that could happen. But if they keep screaming that, they're just like the boy who cried wolf, right? Eventually they will be right if they keep saying the same thing, but simply saying the same thing is not a very accurate analysis. So my strategy to go buy this is to just watch for a trend reversal, which is what we're starting to see, and then watch and see how we end up reacting to some key levels. Do we base at these levels or not? And just slowly watch it. I think SPY, the QQQ, and many others have more downside. I also want to note that Tesla and other stocks may get dragged down a little bit, but then we'll see if Tesla could bounce because of some news. It has potential to do so, so we'll see how the news goes for it. All right, so Tesla looks strong. Many EVs look relatively strong right now. Other stocks like SPY and the QQQ are looking weaker. Same thing with like Microsoft and Apple. And then we'll see how it goes. We're seeing a lot of big tech stocks slowing down just a bit. This looks like a little pullback that's coming, but it doesn't guarantee a massive crash is here right now. So far, it's just a pullback. So just keep your minds together, keep your cool, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you for listening, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Tesla, the market, and everything to the moon because the long term is still very bright for the majority of stocks. And peace out.